Mental health is also in that category. It's a thing that means you're not 100% of the time, and having a conversation around that is okay and actually beneficial for yourself and for the people that you're working with and looking after.
I'm excited today because I'm here with Amy Brown, who is someone I've known for around 20 years really, and we've been in and out of each other's lives in bizarre ways, but most recently Amy was my Deputy Secretary when I worked at Department of Government and Cabinet. So Amy, thank you so much for being here on our new series.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm excited too. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you do for work?
Sure. So Amy Brown, for work, I'm Deputy Secretary in Department of Premier and Cabinet. I look after a group called Strategy and Delivery, and what that means is I get to advise the Premier, and with a very, very fantastic team behind me, on any issue that's important to New South Wales. So that could be schools and hospitals and bridges and roads. It could be music festivals and lockout laws, homelessness, kids, early childhood, etc. So just think of anything that could be important to the people in New South Wales who are making our decisions, and that's what I get to advise on. I'm also a mum. I've got a 10-year-old called Zach and a 7-year-old called Evie, and they're lots of fun. They're both swimmers, so we have lots of early mornings in our households. But yeah, absolutely love being a mum. My husband Rory also works for New South Wales Government, so a bit of a New South Wales Government family. And yeah, I just enjoy spending time with the kids and being outdoors and the beach and spending a lot of time thinking about how we can serve New South Wales better.
That's amazing. And you're a mum, you're in a position of leadership.
Yep.
You've been in a position of leadership both here, also when you're a partner of a consulting firm, but also generally you're a leader when it doesn't have a title necessarily attached to it. We often talk about leaders needing to be vulnerable and authentic. How do you think that actually works in practice?
I've been thinking a lot about vulnerability actually, and one of the reasons for that is vulnerability is often associated with quite a negative emotion because people associate it with kind of fear or not living up to expectations or not doing as well as they'd like to, or being out of the comfort zone or uncertainty. And so that makes us kind of shy away from vulnerability quite a bit, and together with that authenticity some of the time. So what I think is that with vulnerability comes quite a bit of power and strength, because when you're vulnerable, it means you can be empathetic. And when you're empathetic, it means that you're better at looking after the people around you, but also better at your job. So I'll give you an example. For me to be able to help New South Wales serve its people better, I need to be able to put myself in their shoes. And that takes quite a bit of vulnerability. So instead of, saying to someone who's in trouble, you shouldn't be in a place where you feel like, you're hurting yourself and others around you. If I take that from a more vulnerable position, I can say, I know what it's like to be in a place where, you're hurting yourself and others around you. And let's talk about that. And let's actually talk about how we can help you in that. And then use that to think, actually, what system-wide changes can we make to help people who aren't doing as well as they could or aren't fulfilling their potential. But to lead in that way, that's very, very vulnerable to say, I can relate to people who are having a hard time. And I think that's why some leaders struggle to lean into that vulnerability and to lean into kind of the discomfort of that. But I do believe that having as much empathy as you could possibly muster makes you better at your job.
Yeah, and I think that you've demonstrated that both in, the fact that you talk about proudly being a mum and you bring your thinking around being a mum to work as well, but also in the way that you do really care and that you talk about serving the people of New South Wales and having worked with you and knowing you. I think that is something you genuinely carry with you. What do you think are some of the misconceptions about leadership?
Good question. Leadership, I think I used to think of leadership as if it was almost a skill set, or you could just do a course and say, right, here are the 20 things you need to know how to do, as if it's a doing thing, to be a leader. And I'll do a course to learn about, how to have better financial understanding, or how to have better PowerPoint presentation, or how to be able to have difficult conversations. And yes, they're all good things. But being a leader isn't necessarily about what you do. It's kind of what you are and who you are and what you let yourself to be. And so I think you lead best when you're in a zone where you're actually using your strengths. So instead of saying I have all these skills gaps that I need to plug, it's much better to say, I'd say almost listing 3 things. What are my strengths? What am I kind of good at that seems to kind of pop out from the crowd that's a bit different from everyone else, or where I feel good about myself? What are the things I'm passionate about? And then even what sort of problems do I want to solve? Like, what do I want to get my teeth stuck into in my job? And it's almost a Venn diagram. And when you get into that place where you're in a strength zone and you're really passionate about what you're doing, I think that's when leadership comes to its fruition. So yeah, lead in a way that's you and in a way where you're playing to your strengths.
And I think anyone that has worked with you and near you would feel that from you in terms of your authenticity, but also your passions and the way that you serve and you give to your employees and the people around you. We talk a lot about mental health and leadership, and we talk a lot about how we can support mental health and those leaders. So that we've seen a lot of leaders right now who would have been going through their own issues, and we've seen it very publicly. How do you think that mental health and leadership work together, and what are some of the things that you do as a leader to care for yourself and your own mental health?
Oh, for me personally, my mental health. In any context, you've got to be fit for whatever you're doing. That might mean physically fit, but it also might mean fit kind of mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And so you don't get fit just by kind of neglecting yourself and not looking after yourself. You actually need to surround yourself by the right support system so that you can be at your best. Having said that, though, every single person in the world has stuff that means that they're not 100% of the time. And that's okay. And I think we tend to draw out mental health to be this, really separate thing from a lot of stuff that people have going on in their lives. So some people suffer from migraines or back pain, or have people who, who are dependent on them in a caring sense. And that means that they need to have conversations with their boss or dial it down a notch, and that's okay. Mental health is also in that category. It's a thing that means you're not 100% of the time, and having a conversation around that is okay and actually beneficial for yourself and for the people that you're working with and looking after. But having said that, you've got to set yourself up to be the best that you can be with those support structures. So for me, I've got really good friends who've known me a really long time, and I can just call them and they kind of know exactly where I'm at and can step in and have a big chat and a nice cup of tea to talk things through. Obviously, I've got my kids, so they get a lot of hugs. I go to church, so I'm a Christian, so that's whatever that might be for you. Some people, meditate or do other things, but that's something for me. I also exercise a lot because I find that by kind of getting out there and moving, it really does clear the mind, and it's good for you physically as well. So I've got a bunch of stuff that I do that means I'm not just working 18 hours a day and that's it. There's a lot else that has to happen in life to enable us to do what we do.
I certainly remember you lining up near me at the JP Morgan fun run and then not seeing you again as you sprinted through that, and I made my trot through Centennial Park. So you did it beautifully. Thank you so much. It was quite slow, but you are, and there's all those kind of hidden gems about you that I've even learnt as we work together in terms of the fact that you play drums. And I do play the drums. Kind of cool stuff. So you really do prioritise that in your work, which is amazing, and in your life. It wouldn't be us doing this right unless we asked you the question of what would you like to say to children and young people in New South Wales? What's something that you want to share with the children and young people in New South Wales?
I think when you're thinking about leadership and what they want to do, or just what they want to do with their lives, but being a leader doesn't mean, like you said at the beginning, it's not about having a title or a particular job status. My 7-year-old daughter is learning how to be a leader amongst her peers and the people around her, and actually saying, as she would say, these friendship fires are silly, we need to sort them out, and, I know, she's very good at friendship fires. I like that. Yeah, that's what they teach me.
We could take that into adult life.
I think so. Well. I often hear her talk and think, oh, I need to borrow some of that.
Yeah.
And kids are actually the most insightful of anyone, so really it's what should young people be saying to us.
Yeah.
But I would say you can be successful and lead in a way that's very true to yourself. Yes, we all have things that we need to refine. We're not all going to be kind of completely unrestricted all of the time. And that's when you need people around you who can feed back and you can say, how did that go? Or why did that person react negatively to me in a meeting? Let's get a bit of self-reflection going. But you can absolutely still be you. And I feel like, you know, through all my leadership journey, and, you know, this has been 25 years worth of work. I know I look younger than that. I've always been myself. So I'm, you know, really proud to say that. So yeah, be true to yourself.
Now, I have the good fortune of knowing your younger self.
Oh yeah, no. Oh gosh.
And as you know,
that's a worry.
I always think that you were a really bright, wonderful light, and you were always very kind and generous with your time, but you're also very engaging and inviting and inclusive. But what is something that you would say to your younger self?
Wow. It's interesting what you say about inclusive. My family motto, you know, with my kids now, is make sure everyone's included. And when you actually apply that, obviously that can take many different forms, but I love the make sure everybody's included, because that's how we make sure that everyone, as a society, everyone can be the best we can be. And in terms of us as a collection, our overall well-being is at its best. Random one though, I'd also say, mainly to my younger self, mainly because I didn't do it, take more time off when you have the opportunity to. So that might be gap years, it might be when you're between jobs, it might be maternity leave. But I've always kicked myself that I didn't take kind of a year out at some point, including I didn't take much mat leave, which is a problem in itself. But just embrace the opportunities to just stop and learn in a way that you don't learn when you're at a desk or in a formal kind of employment or study, and yeah, have a bit more of an adventure, because as you get through your career and look back, you think, well, you know, 6 months off the tools wouldn't have made any difference from a career progression perspective, but I would have learnt a lot. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for being your usual, authentic, genuine self, and thank you for the job that you do and the fact that you so passionately serve the people of New South Wales and the children and young people of New South Wales.
Yes.
So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.